So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is TJ Nedro, and I will be moderating this wonderful event that provides you information on traffic incident management and therefore. So every year, first responders and their family members are impacted by the aftermath of difficult calls. Departments spent time and effort to ensure that members return home safely after working to protect the public from the dangers they face. A very important variable that keeps everyone safe is roadway safety. Taking the necessary steps during every call to ensure that the risks and the hazards are reduced requires diligence and training on a regular basis. We're happy to have you here with this panel of subject matter experts during the roundtable talk to learn more about how proper traffic incident management training at your department can help save the lives of emergency personnel and the public. And we will have other valuable takeaways to offer up. So keep your notepad handy. So with that, I am going to quickly ask our panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Doug DeHavilland.
Good afternoon, everyone. Doug DeHaven. I'm with Cumberland Valley Volunteer Firemen Association and Emergency Responder Safety Institute, retired fire marshal and heavily into community risk reduction locally and with Cumberland Valley Emergency Responder Safety.
Thank you, Doug. How about you, Jack?
Hey, everybody. Jack Sullivan, Director of Training for the Emergency Responder Safety Institute, also retired volunteer firefighter and a 40-year career safety professional working in the public and private sector.
And Mr. Joe Tebow.
Greetings, everyone. Joe Tebow here, Federal Highway Administration's Traffic Incident Management Team. Also noteworthy life member, past commanding officer, Arbutus Volunteers, Baltimore County, Maryland. So welcome aboard.
Thank you. And again, I am TJ Nedro. I'm a Washington State Director with the National Volunteer Fire Council with over 30 years related to traffic incident management in various state, local, and national organizations, which has allowed me to be able to rub elbows with some wonderful people that show the same kind of passion that these three individuals do, with that very, very large bug on their shoulder that says everyone goes home safely. So thank you for all being here. Today's discussion will last about an hour, depending on how many questions we receive, so don't be shy. I have some questions that we'll already start the discussion with, but we're also taking those from you, the audience. So if you do have any, we'd really like to hear them. And so let's get started, if we may. And I'll go with Jack first for 500. No, that's the wrong game. So how do we get first responders to become engaged in the TIM conversations and initiatives? So take it away, Jack.
Well, I can tell you the way I got involved was not the right way, and that is a line of duty death in my own department from an incident that occurred back in March of 1998. At that particular time, we had a tractor trailer that went out of control on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and hit 10 of our personnel, 2 EMTs and 8 firefighters, killed one of the firefighters, firefighter Dave Good. And obviously, if you have a line of duty death in your department, that gets your attention. When you have 10 of your personnel involved in a serious incident at one time, that gets a lot of attention. And back in 1998, there weren't many people in the fire service talking about traffic incident management or highway incident safety or roadway incident safety or whatever you want to call it. And I guess as the safety officer in that department that had retired shortly before that crash, I kind of took on the job of researching the subject to see what we could do to find out what we could do differently to prevent an incident like that from happening again. And we've been talking about it ever since, 25 years at this point, a little bit more actually. And I think we're hoping that the audience already is aware of the subject. We try to do the best we can at responder safety to keep people aware of secondary crashes and struck by incidents involving fire, EMS, law enforcement, safety service patrols, towing and recovery operators. We make the hazard as visible as possible. And then we also offer a whole bunch of solutions that we'll talk about later. But I would hope that all of the departments represented here today have included traffic incident management as part of their basic level of training for all of their personnel. And more importantly, that they also look to it as one of those annual in-service training subjects that they should be addressing at a minimum, at least once a year, to refresh everybody on whatever standard operating procedures or guidelines you have in your department. Maybe go over some case studies, look at some things that have happened around the country. Don't wait until something happens in your own department to start to address this subject. We need to be proactive and start working on it right away.
Absolutely, Jack. I would like to just emphasize the incident that got Jack involved and engaged. We have over 16,000 accidents a year. So it's not an if, but it's a when that's going to happen. No, I guess that's a month, isn't it? Yeah. And with that, what I've seen in my involvement with line of duty deaths in Washington State, once that department has suffered that training, that becomes a catalyst to ensuring that everyone gets involved with the training, with the emphasis. So what I would say is, don't let your department be one of those that is an example of bringing, in this case, traffic incident management to the forefront and being the example for yours in your region that this really is important. Start it now. So with that, I'm going to open it up to the remainder of Doug and Joe if they want to add comments to, again, how do we get first responders to become engaged in the TIM conversation and the initiatives?
Well, I'll jump in, TJ, and to tag on to what you and Jack both said, right, in fire service. I joined fire service in the late 70s. So had that, along with a couple of you guys, had that experience of watching it grow, right? And watching it take off and become a formal thing, right? I remember when it was more like a game of Frogger working out there on the roadways, right? That it really wasn't much to it, and there were a lot of close calls and a lot of strikes. The fire service and other services way too often do that. Nothing happens until something happens kind of approach, and then it's too late. So every state has a TIM committee. I'd encourage them to get involved with that. You have safety officers in your department. Encourage the safety officers, if they're not already engaged, to make it a standing agenda item for safety committee meetings and briefings. All of those things that we already do for all the other required disciplines and talents that we have to have, right? Make this one of them. It's part of that cornerstone to keeping folks alive. And if you need the somber side of it, there are many survivors that were struck in life-changing injuries that would be more than happy to sit in on your briefings or to give a presentation. They're also the surviving members of folks who have been struck and lost their lives after a working incident that will also tell their stories. So it goes deeper than just us and just me. It has such a ripple effect when someone is struck, whether it's fatal or just serious injuries, that it warrants the attention that every other function we have in our profession to train, retrain, and drill. So that's what I would say. Make it a priority. And encourage others to talk it up.
Doug, thoughts?
Yeah, I can just echo what the two experts here have to say. And I unfortunately was involved 2 months after Jack's incident. Our department was involved with my chief's father was fire police and was struck and killed on the interstate in our first due area there in May of 1998. That brought us into and working with Jack's group of developing what's now Emergency Responder Safety Institute. But we've done some great things, but I can't stress enough that we've got a long ways to go. We need more participation. We need everyone taking TIMS. We need everyone to always remain alert. Nate, my neighbor, who's a local fire chief, works down to near the DC metropolitan area, working in accident scene, was struck the other day. Minor injuries, but it's occurring way too often. And I'm sure Jack and Joe's going to talk more about it as we go along. We've got a lot to go, which means we're still missing people. We still need to get more people out, getting the training available, and always keeping that head on the swivel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to respond to one of the comments in the comments section, the chat box right now. Crystal is indicating that her father was struck and killed in December of last year. I had him as one of our line of duty deaths in the Mapleton Fire Department in Huntington County, PA. He was directing traffic at the time when he was struck and killed. And Crystal's asking, how do we get folks in the department to even talk about the subject? Crystal, I'm going to drop a link in the chat box for one of the videos that we did it was about 2 years after the crash on the turnpike in 2000. We put together a video called The 10 Cones of Highway Safety. And it's a good introduction to the subject. And it also recounts the story of the turnpike crash. And more importantly, how it affected other people in addition to the line of duty death, those injuries that were sustained by the other parties in the department, and the impact on the families of those people who were injured and the firefighter who was killed are all covered in that video. And that's a good start just to get people to think about the subject. And then we've got tons of resources we'll talk about later on in the hour that you can tap into to actually provide that training for your personnel.
Outstanding.
TJ, if I
yeah.
could jump in, if you don't mind, to Crystal and everyone for that matter, but especially Crystal. I see you're the safety officer, right, for Mount Union EMS, and your question about how to get them interested. Well, you know, the National Roadway Safety Strategy has one of the elements as post-crash care for EMS. So make yourself familiar with that if you're not, and maybe use it as part of your springboard to get the traffic incident management talk going, along with your own personal story about your dad, and condolences for you. But you know, you have a strong message. You know, you're a survivor. You're a survivor, a family member survivor. So you have a strong message, and I think you'll make good ground if you use all the tools at your disposal. And if we can help you, if responder safety, all of us on here are all more than willing to help you out in any way we can. You know, I'm a huge fan of ERSI and respondersafety.com. If you don't believe me, go look at my transcript. Right. So, you know, I take advantage of all of it because I'm a huge believer in train and train some more. Right. So that and that's the avenue that I take. But yeah, NRSS and post-crash care may be a good springboard for you to get involved in.
Absolutely. And the one piece before our next question that I would add in, all three of these can be able to speak to this at length, is it's not just the fire department. And I did see one in here that talks about educating the motorist. There is so much that we need to do to educate the motorist. I would challenge folks to sit down around the table and say, how can we do that locally? Can we, at our fire department annual open house, can we talk about traffic incident management and what the motorist can do? Invite your TIM partners in, whether it's the tow operators or law enforcement. Invite them in. and stress the need. Make others wear that badge of honor that I'm a TIM educator, and let that become one of the greatest strengths in your departments. Because, as said, with a safety officer, you have in that position the ability to promote safety every meeting, every drill, before and after every incident. And let's not forget, we should all be able to learn improvements after every action that we do. So thank you, guys. That was great. Let's go with number 2, and I'll go with Joe first on this one. And how do we promote the use and the research of the technology to keep first responders safe on the road?
Well, technology, right? Federal Highway launches the Everyday Counts program, and we've been fortunate enough to been selected for the last EDC 6 and now EDC 7, which is Technologies for Saving Lives. And you know, we're chasing technology. I doubt we'll ever catch it, right? Because it changes so rapidly. But take a look at the technology segments of EDC 7. Reach out to us. We'd be happy to give any presentations or information we have for the technologies this year, which are, you know, advanced warning, you know, and that's not just signs and cones, right? We're getting into electronic technology now, Haas alerts and synchronized electronic road flares, and you know, personal visual devices like guardian angels. And you know, there's so many technological advances. We have UAS, we have debris removal devices, emergency vehicle lighting, which I like to really redefine as smart lighting for emergency vehicles. Things we can do to help the driver, right? Those folks that are out there who are actually paying attention while they're driving, right? To give them the right advance warning, make it clear and concise to their direction of travel, where you want them to go. You know, using technology to your advantage, and there's so much of it out there, and too little time, you know, to cover all of it in depth. But be more than happy to do that for any group, any department, at your request. I know TJ, Jack, Doug, you guys probably extend the, you know, the same, you know, branch. You know, just come talk to us and we'll help you. But there are a lot of things happening. And a lot of departments are really on the cutting edge of a lot of that. You know, there are some folks that, you know, they have the luxury of big budgets and other things, right? That can help them, you know, advance. Not everyone has that luxury, and I recognize that for sure. But you know, take a look at what's out there. Contact us, contact RC. We'd be more than happy to steer you in that right direction.
Jack, Doug?
The only thing I would add, actually, just to reinforce what Joe said, I think the digital alerting technology that's out there these days is probably one of the easiest and most cost-efficient technology advances that we can incorporate pretty quickly. It involves a transponder on your emergency vehicle. Once it's installed, all you have to do is activate your emergency warning equipment, flip your warning lights on, and then it does the rest for you. And it sends a message to the cloud that then relays that message to various navigation systems. And the Stellantis Auto Group, which is Dodge and Chrysler vehicles, for example, are now receiving those messages direct to the infotainment system on your vehicle that warns you in advance audibly that there's an incident ahead or an emergency vehicle is approaching. What it does is get somebody in the vehicle an audible cue that something's happening. So even if they're not looking out the windshield, that audible message or ding will get you to look up and go, what's going on? And paying attention to what's around you, whether you're approaching an incident or an emergency vehicle is approaching you. It's coming as standard equipment on new apparatus these days. We all know that we're looking at long lead times on new apparatus these days, but at the same time, some of you probably ordered 2 or 3 years ago, and maybe it's coming. I know some departments have it on new equipment that they've received, but for various reasons have opted not to activate it, which I don't quite understand, because most of the manufacturers are covering the cost of using that system for the first few years of that new apparatus being in service. So if you're not using digital alerting technology, I think that's one of the ones that you probably want to investigate first, that has a huge payback, positive payback, I think.
Okay, well, let's go on to the next one. And that would be, how can we incorporate Tim into the community education and the CRR? And we'll go to Doug first on this one.
Very good. So, as we talk community risk reduction, you should be looking at the high risk in your community, which you never get me to say it's not a fire. Fire is the high risk in the community, but it's not the calls we handle. The volume of calls that every fire department's running these days are EMS related calls. Fair chunk of those EMS calls are crashes where something involving a vehicle, something involving the roadway. That's where our call loads put us on the roadway. Yet I'm amazed at how little the fire service invests on the calls they run the most of. And as I've grown beyond fire prevention, we're taking and looking at our audience and what calls we handle. In Hagerstown, we ran about 4,000 calls a year, of which 80% of those were medical calls, mostly overdoses, followed by vehicle type crashes. We're not an EMS transport company. So what were we doing was out there with the police, knocking on doors, picking up, old medications and drug type calls, followed up by vehicle type incidents. Take the opportunities while you're out there. Yeah, we need to talk about fire prevention and talk about smoke detectors, but we should be talking evenly about roadway safety, and things that can protect us while we're on the roadways. Talk about, though, as we've termed them, D drivers, the distracted drivers. Well, we're talking about them. How's that D driving affecting us? We're out there, we're on the roadway. You not paying attention is putting us at risk. So we should be pushing the message. If it's move over, if it's about the D driver, we need to be pushing the message of not just the issues they are creating, causing our response, but then what happens to us while we are standing out there. So, we're going to get into resources later, but I strongly encourage everyone to get on respondersafety.com. Look at the public education PIO section. We've got tons of information that you can download, put your logos in there, and let's get it out to the public. Again, we spend time and time again on smoke alarm, CO alarm, rightfully so, but we should be spending even amount of times talking to the community, talking to driver education programs, talking whatever chance we have about the bulk of the calls that we run and what that is and how it affects us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would add one piece on this CRR and the community is that it's an all risk focus we should have. It's not wildland. It's not the highway, but there's 12 months in a year. So why could we not, as a PIO, take on each one of those risks and focus on that every month, get it in the schools? We talk about, I saw one about not being able to get your folks to wear the PPEs. Gosh, who can raise their hand that's on the screen and say, who had problems back in the beginning about seatbelts? We all did. I knew of troopers that would cut the seatbelt out so they didn't have to wear them.
Yep.
We have gone beyond that, and some of that was shaming. But in departments that I visit, by the time I walk out of there, that PPE is on top of that bunker gear to where you can always take it off. Or you can find ways for them to get that gear, but no reason. That act of prevention creates that aspect that is preventable. Joe?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to toss it in there. My favorite saying regarding PPE right? And I shared it with you guys recently, right? And as a longtime biker, right, we've always I live by the saying that you dress for the slide, not for the ride, right? And that mentality can transfer over, right, to working out there on the roadway, understanding all of the hazards and risks, and knowing that folks are intruding into our safety zones while working. But kind of look around and ask yourself, you know, if I were to be involved in a strike, you know, what's the odds? What kind of protection do I have? What are my odds of survival, for that matter? I gave a presentation to all the state medical directors a couple of weeks ago, and it's the talks after the presentations that you usually gain the most value out of, right? So those hallway discussions, you know, they collectively, and you know, they're trauma surgeons, they're, you know, from all around the nation, and you know, with no question, right? No holds barred. When they're treating, whether it's just a, you know, your average citizen pedestrian struck, and some of them have treated the responders that we know of that have been struck, and they all say the same thing. Overwhelmingly, the most traumatic injury they experience is a head injury. Right? Road rash they can deal with for the most part, but head injuries are typically the most common, serious, if not fatal, if not life-changing, if survived, injury. So ask yourself, is that interior structural firefighter helmet that you're wearing going to fly off your head if you have to make a quick dive over a guardrail or jersey wall, or Lord forbid you get struck? You know, is your noggin going to be protected, or is it going to be out there, right? So you know, dress for the slide, not for the ride, and you know, draw parallels, you know, between things, as you know, that's what I do, you know. And yeah, look, I'm looking, I like that, Jack, right? Dress for the strike, not for the like, right? Yeah, that's pretty cool. You know, however you make it happen, you know, but and we know it, you know, it's happening almost on a daily basis. What we know of are line of duty deaths, and you know what we have, we don't really have our finger on the pulse of every strike, right? Because not every time is it, you know, not even injuries involved, but that $1.2 million fire engine, or you know, $3 million heavy tow rig is now total, right? So you know, prepare for that. We know those things are out there, and there's a possibility and a likelihood that it could happen. What have you done to prepare yourself and your crew, you know, in the event that happens? And don't forget about wrong way drivers and wrong way strikes, because we're hearing about those now too. Protect yourself from the traffic coming upstream, but now they're coming from downstream, wrong way, on expressways, on local roads, and they're intruding into an existing scene. So, you know, start thinking, right? What can we do? Have we protected ourselves?
Along that vein, too, let's not forget that we're alone out there on that highway. So having these conversations, whether you go to the schools or PTA or city council, don't go alone. Go with your partners at the same time, to where we put the emphasis that we're all up here. You know, there was once, a long time ago, a video, and it talked about the hats of Tim. And there were many different hats that were talked about, and nothing has changed. We have just found other issues that seem to overwhelm us. Whereas, again, if we can talk about each one of these every month to the citizens and our responders, we're better off. There's value to be added in that. Definitely.
I think we need to maximize the use of social media, and you have to do it on a local level. So most of the many of the fire departments now have a social media presence. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, pick whatever you want, but do what you can to grow the followers in your own first run area. Report to them about incidents that you handle on a regular basis, and try to draw a lesson out of those incidents that occur in your own area that people can relate to get the message across about how to approach an emergency scene and pass it safely, what to do if an emergency vehicle is coming up behind you and responding to an incident, whatever the case may be. There's plenty of material out there to help you formulate good social media messaging on a consistent, regular basis that will help get the attention of the people that are in your district. And they'll help build that rapport too. You want them on your side. The more they get to know about you and what you're doing, for the community, the more likely they are to support your efforts and to help out. So in this day and age, maximizing social media presence, I think, is a worthwhile investment. And it's one of those things that you can use people who maybe aren't actively responding to emergencies for your department, but have the time to work on social media. That's something anybody can do to assist you. And I don't think we maximize those people as much as we could in the volunteer fire service. Even if they can't respond to emergencies, there's plenty of things they can do to help with our community risk reduction efforts.
And that, I think, Jack, can carry on to rather it just not that community, it could be in that region.
Sure.
So think larger than just that white line that separates jurisdictions. So, hey, Jack, let's talk about the data to inform our strategies. How do we deal with that? Vehicle strikes and alike.
You know, one of the most common questions we get at responder safety is how many struck by incidents have occurred in the past year? How many fatalities have occurred? How many injuries have occurred? How much money is involved with all of these secondary crashes and struck by incidents? And I've been trying for 25 years to collect that kind of information. And the bottom line is that there's very precious little information that's readily available in the way of statistics on this stuff. We do a pretty solid job at responder safety of tracking the fatalities that are a result of secondary crashes and struck by incidents. And I just double checked, we're up to 18 so far for this calendar year. 3 law enforcement officers have been struck and killed, 4 in fire and EMS in 2023. 10 tow operators have been struck and killed at roadway incidents, and 1 safety service patrol operator so far this year. So 18, and we're halfway through the year at this point. I would say that number is better than what we've seen in the last 3 years, but the year's not over yet. And unfortunately, these statistics tend to go up and down on a regular basis. We did a look at the 4-year time frame of 2019 to 2022, and we had a total of 206 fatalities from being struck by vehicles over that 4-year period. 82 of them were law enforcement officers, 33 were in the fire and EMS community, 75 tow operators, 10 road service technicians, and 6 safety service patrol operators over a 4-year time frame were struck and killed. The follow-up question I always get is, well, how many injuries were there? We don't know because there's no way to track that information, unfortunately. And a lot of people ask, well, how many struck by incidents or secondary crashes are occurring? Some of that information is available at a state level, but it has not been accumulated at a federal level to give us a ballpark picture of what's happening across the country as a whole. There are a number of agencies that are working to improve it. And one of the things that we did over the past year at Responder Safety, working with the Federal Highway Administration, was to put together a page on our website. And I'll drop a link in the chat box, where we're asking people to report information on struck by incidents and secondary crashes involving emergency responders to help us get a more clear picture of what's going on. And unfortunately, we don't have good data for the last few years. When we look at the data that has occurred, one of the things that I can tell you from a fire and EMS standpoint, you probably have the highest probability of being struck in a secondary incident at a crash scene. That is the second highest category of locations or incident types where emergency responders are being struck and killed. The top type of incident where responders are being struck and killed are disabled vehicles, and that's most probably the towing and recovery community, although I do know of a few incidents that involve law enforcement officers who were working with a disabled vehicle at the time also. But in the fire and EMS services, when you're responding to a vehicle crash of some sort, that's where you have the highest probability of being struck in a secondary crash. So we have some data that we can look and track and know where the problem areas are. But we don't have great data, and that's one of the things that we're trying to improve. And our effort in the past year was to put together the reportstruckby.com website page to try and collect this data. As we get more data in the system, we'll be able to analyze it and report it out and give you better data to work with in your efforts locally.
Absolutely. Quickly, Doug, Joe?
If I could follow up, working with Jack, and one death is way too many.
Absolutely.
We're after a zero here. We got to hit the zero, but our numbers, we're not able to show good numbers. The injuries that are occurring, I bet we're not even close to guessing a right number. Especially in the volunteer service, your vehicle gets struck, your vehicle's out of service. That's a huge impact on the volunteer department. That's even a bigger impact on that community. I think Joe said it earlier, to get a new fire truck, you're way down the line nowadays. Nothing's happening and the cost is just incredible. So an impact on our vehicle. The long-term injuries that's occurring, and you mentioned the head injuries, they're career ending. And that's the impact that we've really got to get a better handle on, I think. And that's by everybody reporting the struck by incidents, and responder safety has this ability to do that now. We got to encourage you to do it. We need that information to get a true picture of what's going on.
Yeah. Good points. And I'll also mention there's work being done for the, let me see if I can get this right, the Model Manual for Uniform Crash Criteria, the MUC, right? And right, the data from law enforcement, and for there are more MUC forms out there than Carter's got liver pills. But one of the problems that exists is that a responder does get struck, even if it's minor, on that official report just shows pedestrian, right? Can show just pedestrian. And yeah, well, they're responders and they were pedestrians, but there's no other identification. So, there's work being done to try to make that more uniform right across the nation. But when you look at law enforcement agencies across the nation, just like volunteer fire service, EMS service, it's very diversified, from the small town 9 to 5 police department to major trooper, interstate, complete state police agencies. It's very diversified. So the data is vital to identifying trends, weaknesses, right? And we don't have that. We just don't have that mechanism for serious injury, first aid injury, no injury, but vehicle struck and taken out of service. And that all that data lies, if you envision the iceberg, right? The tip of the iceberg sticking out of the water is line of duty deaths, right? I mean, we got a relatively good handle on that, right? Because you tend to hear about it, even if it's not reported, right? With social media today and all, we tend to find out about it, right? But all below the surface of that water, are all the non-fatal strikes, and that would tell a story.
So, Joe, tell me, what do we do after the crash? What's important?
Well, after the crash, first off, what's important, right, to me, and I'm sure to you, first off, take care of your people. Okay. Now, if we're talking crash with no responder struck, right, and everything went quote unquote according to plan, so to speak, there should be at least a hot wash, right? Get the players together while everything's fresh in the mind. What went well? What can we improve upon? Right. And then, have action items, right? Don't just say we should do this better, but have someone who's going to be accountable for making that happen, or leading that charge, so to speak. So, and make sure all the disciplines are included, and the sooner the better, right? Versus, we talk about after action reviews, call it what you like, right? But to discuss each and every incident, because way too often everything starts to clear, everybody goes home, and there's no more interaction, and fires, hazmat incidents, we mass casualty events, we're right on top of that as a service for the most part. But crashes, just like another face in the crowd, we'll just wait for the next one. So, talk it over, even if it's just your crew, right? Discuss it.
There's no question, and I lead off with the comment. Look what Jack Sullivan has done after the crash. Took it upon himself, convinced others. There were improvements. There were ways we could improve how we do business, how we put things in writing that end result save lives, that promote efficiencies, that create standards that we can follow, promote those SOPs, SOGs. The list goes on and on. And, Joe, you talked about federal and the muck. There is tons that are out there on the national level that we've been involved with. Even I see one of the comments, how do we get more into the MUTCD? Well, and I'm sure I can say to the rest of the people on here, wow, what a tall order. But we have made strides to get more into the MUTCD. It is a Herculean effort, and we can do that. But all in all, it takes people at the ground level to say, again, what can I do? And then go do it. To be able to say to someone that says, well, and for you folks to be able to say, why not? Or why? And challenge the status quo to be able to make a difference. The people on your screen have done that over and over and over, and we haven't taken no for the answer. We have continued down that road to say, this is what's important. I don't believe that no is the correct answer. And to the next piece on this is, what are the resources available? And again, we with 20, 30 years in this go, wow, we had nothing. And we now have more information than we can be able to disseminate. But it's just like that pond. We can lead you to the pond. You have to drink the water, and you have to make it difficult for others to say no. And Joe had just put up a piece to talk about FHWA and Tim. So let's talk about the resources and lead into that. And I'm going to let Doug go first, since Doug knows it all.
No, he's far from knowing it all. Far. But responder safety, we have on our webpage, one of the tabs is public information, public education, and PIO, where there's several already brochures ready. Throw your own logo on there, print. Some stuff's available, we can ship it to you, but that's getting tougher to do. But they're all on this site. There's also ready to run downloadable for TV commercials for your own displays. There's radio, TV stuff. There's just a ton of stuff we've been able to collect and put on there. I think Jack helped me out. It was like 15,000 pages right now of information between training and public education stuff. So we have a lot of resources available to you. And I challenge, August 1st is National Night Out. At least that's a date here locally. Police have various events going on. Why aren't we there pushing safety, pushing our safety at that event? Every weekend and many fire companies, volunteer fire companies are involved in car shows, parades, at their carnivals. Why aren't we putting up information out there, not just for recruitment and retention of our people in our community to volunteer with us, but why aren't we putting up traffic safety messaging, move over messaging, information will protect us? Take every opportunity possible, put stuff out there for the volume of calls that your company responds to. On top of responder safety, talk to your local insurance agents. They have access to information there. Your state highway, Department of Highways. Some of those, I know Maryland, we have resources there, including some funding locally that can help you out. So there's a lot out there. Of course, we start with ours, respondersafety.com.
Now, in regards to what I've been able to capture out of this, gentlemen, you've done a yeoman's job. One is PPE. There is information out there. There is regulations in some states that require PPE. Helmets, I saw that as one of the comments, and many are looking at a different helmet other than what we use in fire suppression, and that's a good thing. It's something that will lessen exposure of that responder with some of the weather environments. We look at PPE lighting. There are vendors nationally that if you connect up with, you might get one or two of their products to try and be able to identify that as another, just one more carrot that will keep your responder seen and visible. There was another comment to talk about we need to get the state DOTs more involved. I guess I'll be a little bit brash and say, why haven't you tried that yet? Why haven't you reached out to them and say, I need your help? There is a state DOT that focuses on traffic incident management. Washington State has a coalition, and we've got 14 different members on that: towing, law enforcement, fire, medical examiners, insurance, trucking, transit, to name a few. Some of those are eyes and ears that we can use. We have utility contractors. They fall into the requirement of having proper PPE when they're out on the road. We have all kinds of friends in the TIM community, and some have resources beyond just the people. They also have some of the funding. AAA, as an example, has the ability to help you. There is just a tremendous amount out there that all we have to do is ask. And I will say this, and I've said it throughout my career: the answer is no until you ask. And what better to do than to ask and find those friends that can be able to help. We've had 18 LODDs on our roadway this year. That's unacceptable. But remember, we can do all the training we can, and it's been talked about here. We have a very difficult time in being able to control and predict that motorist. I've said it in my DOT career in corridor planning. If we could just shut the cell towers off, we could reduce incidences by the millions. And no question. But we have to continue to keep dialogues in so many different directions. Even talking to your lawmakers about passing legislation that creates consequences for the actions of those that do not heed to their responsibility as motorists.
Hey, TJ, this is.
I'm going to open this up to the panel here.
TJ, this is a good time to promote the TIM committees. Regional TIM committees are an excellent way of bridging some of those gaps that you're talking about between DOT and fire departments and things like that. We promote on a regular basis TIM committees on a local and regional level. If you're not already as a department involved with a TIM committee, don't wait for somebody else to start one. We've got guidance on our website about how to initiate a TIM committee in your area by inviting representatives from each of the other disciplines to join occasionally. Most areas will do those TIM committee meetings at least on a quarterly basis. In some cases where there is major roadway construction or special events planned, the frequency of those meetings might bump up to monthly or even semi-monthly. In some cases, once a week as you get closer to an event. But the idea of bringing all of the different disciplines together with various representatives to talk about all of the issues that we've talked about today, you'll be amazed how many resources are available in your own backyard. And that networking and those connections that you make in a TIM committee can make a really big difference in your area.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I'll jump in and add, some of these projects, going to require a little bit of money, right? And, that's a rare commodity for a lot of folks, right? A lot of departments. But I heard something just earlier this week, and I put it in the chat, a link to it, and the stick funding that's available out there to states. $100,000 per state. You have to apply for it, have some type of innovation, right? But the number that startled me was there only $900,000 has been distributed so far in this go round of stick, right? Well, it's $100,000 per state. That's only 9 states that have applied for stick funding, right? So if you can make contact with your state point of contact for traffic incident management, ask them if they've participated in stick, and if not, let them know that you've got some things that you want to get done, and can we make that happen, right? Because it's $100,000, and there's a lot of money sitting out there on the table that has yet to be tapped into. So just another tool in the toolbox, if you would. Think about stick. Think about some funding and talk to your states.
Joe, is that a resource that you can be able to collectively as a regional group apply for?
You do it through the state, right? But it can be for a volunteer fire company. Maybe you want to put together a blocking vehicle, right? You want to retire a pumper and convert it into a traffic blocking vehicle, and you need some funding to make that happen, and that's innovation, right? And that's what stick funding is all about. So you might not get all that you need, but it'll help fill the piggy bank, right? But once again, as Jack was talking earlier, about data, right? Data is what makes a solid business case when you go in front of the folks who give it the up and down head or the side to side head, right? So collect your data, have your ducks in a row, utilize what's out there, tap into the resources, and build a strong business case for what it is you're trying to do. Even if you're a single volunteer fire company that wants to get something done, right? You're eligible, right? But you got to work it through the state. State has to make the official application.
Yeah, really. Well, I see that we are essentially out of time. I can explicitly say that we could talk for the rest of the day and still not cover everything. But again, thank you, everyone. We are so blessed to be able to have the enthusiasm that has been displayed here with comments and suggestions, as well as resources that, whether it be the panelists, the organizations that we represent, and others are out there. It's truly wonderful to be able to see that as we move forward in promoting TIM and being able to help you with the resources to get the word out and to make those long-term changes. So I challenge each and every one of you that haven't put this on an everyday thought on your calendar. What more can I do to promote TIM and to be that example on a true traffic incident management responder/expert. Final quick one paragraph thought from the rest of the panel.
I'll go first. I'm looking at the comment from Ms. William Spaeth, is it? Right, and talking about folks that say this is for big highways and we do not have them, right? Just remind everybody the fatality rate is 6 times higher on local roads than it is expressways. And that, for me, that's all I need to know. I'll
Doug?
end it with that.
Think outside the box. Get out, besides the training aspect to protect your own people, get outside the box on ways to get to your community, the message. We got to keep the message going. We got to hit that 0 deaths and reduce the number of injuries and impacts from struck by incidents.
Jack probably doesn't have anything to say to add.
No, not a thing. I got more that would fill up the rest of the day, so we've put a bunch of links out there for you all, and I just noticed that some of them may not have gone public. Some of them may have only gone to the host and panelists. I'll share my email address to everybody. If there's a question that we didn't get to today that you're looking for an answer, let's make sure that we try to get back to you afterwards, and I'll be glad to try and follow up as best I can with you. If there are questions that you get later on afterwards, follow up with any of us, go through the NVFC or whatever the case may be, and we'll do what we can to follow up for you. I hate to leave you all hanging without all the answers, but let's see what we can do to follow up afterwards on anything that doesn't get handled today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as public service agencies, in a way, whether we're nonprofit or public, we're all professionals in this. And as we can all say, we all look the same 6 feet under. And that must be sometimes a reminder to our leadership to where they really do need to incorporate SOPs and SOGs in all that they do. So we all do return to our families safely, and to the best of our ability, we ensure that the motorists and the citizens do as well. With that, I thank you all. This has been a wonderful conversation that the National Volunteer Fire Council has offered. The council offers many training opportunities online, and we have some that are in-person opportunities that are available as well. I would encourage all of you to go to nvfc.org, check out the website, check out all of the training. Make sure you go to the USDOT website as well as respondersafety.com, as we lean on these two for a tremendous amount of support, as well as doing the heavy lift of data collection, of promoting, of training those out there. We are the ones that protect the protectors. And let's not forget that. And as you become a TIM expert, if you will, you become one of those. And don't ever forget, no is not an answer. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all for attending. Much appreciated. You have a great day. And remember, stay safe.
Good job, TJ.
Thank you.